Hello, friends. Today we will discuss tips on how to beat against the movie Saw from the Hitstar channel. I should immediately explain what I'm trying to convey with this video. Videos titled How to Beat are very popular on YouTube. The idea is simple. The authors take a certain movie and express their supposedly incredibly detailed and useful advice on how one should have defeated a particular enemy, trap, or situation. The main characters are like fools. If they had taken advantage of such suggestions, or if you suddenly found yourself in their place, you would definitely have survived. It sounds great, but in reality, the viewer gets 70 to 90% of the plot retold, and only the remaining 10 to 30% tells us how to defeat something or someone. One of the first to develop this topic was the channel Nerd Explains. Then Hitster joined him with his analyses of the Saw movies, and after that, about a dozen different creators appeared. I was even slightly surprised by the number of views such videos get. And this is despite the fact that most of the suggested ways to win are so stupid and useless that it makes you ashamed for those who even thought of giving such advice. In general, I decided to create my own column, Why You Can't Beat, based on various movies. I think it will be interesting. I will skip retelling the plot, focusing only on the advice on how to win. The first one begins after the characters receive hacksaws in a locked room. The author suggests cutting what seems to be a rusty pipe around which a chain is wrapped. We are hinted that the pipes are very rusty. Cutting through them shouldn't be too difficult. The biggest problem with such advice is the saw blade. In the film, after just a few strokes, it breaks. And that's not surprising. For metal cutting saws, the hacksaw and the saw blade must be of high quality. The blade, in general, should contain cobalt, according to expert advice. It would also be good to use cutting fluid. The prisoners had none of this. The hacksaws that the characters had were very light and wobbled in their hands, falling apart. The most important advice should have been to work properly with the tool. Your movements should be unhurried to avoid the same mishap as in the movie. If we pay attention to the chains that our heroes were cutting after several attempts, there wasn't even a scratch left on them. Again, this may indicate the quality of the blade and that it has already dulled. An expensive and high-quality blade, when used properly, can last for years, while a cheap and low-quality one, as shown in the movie, will dull and break after 5 minutes of work. However, it's worth remembering that an expensive blade is not always a sign of quality. In general, the proposal for cutting the cast iron pipe, especially one of such a large diameter, is a failure. And why did the author decide that the pipe is rusty? I'm not really an expert in this, but this is a cast iron water pipe. They're specially coated with bitumen on the outside and inside to protect against rust. And the pipes for water supply are made of cast iron with spheroidal graphite, which provides additional strength and resistance to mechanical impact. Allegedly, rust on the pipe could be from dirt deposits or something else. By the way, the specifications also indicate that such pipes do not yield in strength to those made of carbon steel. That is, for example, a rail. And this brings us back to the point that a cheap hacksaw blade, as shown in the movie, will dull after 5 minutes of use, which I mentioned above. Therefore, it would simply be impossible to saw through the entire pipe in such a short. Sawing cast iron in reasonably good condition with a saw featuring a poor blade would be pure torture and a difficult task. Next, we are suggested to take a toilet lid and use it to break a padlock. This is a bad suggestion, simply because toilets are usually made of porcelain or earthenware. Both of these materials are ceramics. The toilet lid may not break immediately upon impact with a metal object, but it will eventually shatter into pieces. Such products are generally not very durable. They can be turned into a pile of scraps with a simple firecracker, by smashing with a hammer, or by kicking. I personally tested the last method in my youth. It is impossible to break the lock no matter how you try. By the way, a few words about the padlock itself. I managed to identify it by model. What exactly the product we are dealing with? The description says that the lock is reinforced hardened by the body. Attention, does not cut, does not drill, and is resistant to impact. The only possible option for the captives was to saw through the chain, assuming the saw blade was of good quality. The chain and lock could also potentially be cut with bolt cutters, but that depends on the product itself. Yes, and the heroes did not have bolt cutters. On YouTube, I only found a video with an approximate model of the padlock that could neither be sawed, nor cut, nor drilled and are opened by inserting a screw into the cylinder. I don't argue. They're a cheap attachment lock, but they were not in the movie. Next, we are offered to cut off not the entire foot, but a piece of the leg. For example, the entire heel. This option is designated as the simplest and fastest. This may be good, but in fact everything is not so rainbow. Firstly, you can cut off an insufficient number of heels, and you will not be able to remove the shackles. Second, the volume of the cut surface at the heel and foot may be the same. Thirdly, if you remove your heel and you're saved, the foot itself will most likely be amputated. More correct in this situation, if it can be expressed in general, will try to break his leg. I saw this method in several movies. For this, the aforementioned cover from the toilet can be quite suitable if, of course, it does not break in the process. A fracture of the bones is painful, but even close is incomparable with a slow sawing of the leg. The broken leg will most likely be able to be restored and the cut foot forgotten in the basement. The next trap is with a man in the basement. The author of the video, How to Beat, make a big mistake saying that the victim must go through a room of barbed wire. But this is not a wire, but an armored barb tape of several types. That is, in one moment from a simple trap with barbs, we have the most real room of death. But let's put it in order. The author says that the most obvious way to save yourself is to crawl on your stomach to the exit. After all, there is no wire on the floor. We are also offered not to crawl, but to wrap your hand in underpants, move the wire away, and slowly get to the exit. Both methods are doomed to failure. I repeat once again that a barb tape is not a barbed wire. In addition to the fact that the tape itself is sharpened, and you can cut yourself from spikes, are also installed on it in the form of blades. They can be both short and longer, but they're all sharp like a razor. Such protective structures are installed around the perimeter of military bases and prisons. The principle of operation is simple. When a person tries to climb such a fence, say, cuts himself on the tape hand, pierces his body with spikes. The spikes are made in such a way that first they stick into the victim's body, and when trying to pull them out, they cut the flesh even more. Yes, if the tape is not sharpened, it may not be so dangerous, but you understand that there will be no such scuffs in the saw. Also, a prickly tape not only easily cuts flesh and skin, but clothes and even tight gloves. That is, if you try to crawl on the floor on which the tapes, by the way, are, then you will split your entire back into meat, and not the fact that you will crawl far at all without getting confused pantyhose will not help either. After a few seconds, they will already hang loose on the tapes. Then the author offers the easiest way to defeat the trap. Do nothing and sit still, relying on the fact that your family and loved ones will eventually find you. This method will not work, as it was said that inaction leads to death. For example,
the irony is that if you want to die, you just have to stay where you are. But if you want to live, you'll have to cut yourself again.
The victim from the film was found a month after his death. The trap could be in such a place that even if you have friends in half the city,
this one's not fresh anymore. At least 3 weeks out.
You could still not be found in time. Next, we are told about the next victim. The man was taken to the body of the poison, smeared with a light inflammatory gel. He is in a poorly lit room. He has a candle and a bunch of numbers on the walls. Among them, there is a combination of safes in which there is an antidote. In fact, the conditions of this test in the film are not chewed up at all. Why do we need a candle if there are already enough sources of lighting in the room? Why glass on the floor if the victim is in shoes?
What a twist!
Although this is an understatement, but shoes are easily explained by the need not to turn many actors into minced meat. According to the sufficient lighting, I can assume that the heat from the candle is needed to show the paint, which begins to glow or changes color only when this very candle is brought to it. Do not see other reasons to carry a candle as a victim with such wear and tear lighting. Now let's listen to what advice we are offered to solve this trap. Firstly, you need to be careful with the candle. Secondly, move the leg of the shard to the floor to free up a little space for maneuver. That's all. There are no other tips. I will not comment on the first item for obvious reasons, but on the second, we will dwell in more detail why use the leg. As soon as the victim woke up, she found a dictaphone and a candle on a piece of either plexiglass or reinforced glass. It can be seen that it is held by chains that are connected by unscrewing fasteners. It was possible to disconnect this glass and then scrape it off like a shovel and shards on the floor. Judging by the candle, a victim had at least a few hours. Candles are thick, and when burned, they form a recess with liquid wax, which prolongs the burning. The poison taken to a person is unlikely to kill him in half an hour. It is needed as a pendulum for the back and loss of rationality for the victim. Therefore, after cleaning the shrapnel from the floor, one of them can gently cross the flaming gel from his body as far as possible. By the way, it can be used as additional sources of illumination when looking for a combination from a safe, provided that the theory of luminous heat numbers on the walls is true, and you will not lose the necessary lighting if the candle still burns out. The burning gel will replace it, but you need to be careful, of course. Also, the author makes a huge mistake by saying that the victim of this test is innocent and the saw killed her just for walking around the work. In the film, the direct text says that the man pretended to be sick and deceived a trustworthy poor man for large sums of money, for which he eventually paid. Next comes a legendary trap with a reverse bear trap. There is a trap on your head. If you do not remove it, it will tear your jaw. A man lies next to you with a device, key, in his stomach. You cut the dude, get the key, and you are safe. The author suggests that we do not panic and stay in the chair, since the trap is connected with a wire to this very chair. If you get up, the timer starts and the countdown begins. The bad thing is that we don't know any of this with you. On TV, we are told that if we sit still and do nothing, the trap will blow our heads off, that the salvation is in the stomach of a man lying in the... Any person, without much thought, will first jump out of the chair and start looking for any opportunities to remove the death device. The option that you suddenly decide to stay in the chair, having felt the fifth point of the threat, is practically zero. And even if we guessed about the wire, then there's also one nuance. The fact is that the wire can be tightly fixed to the chair with a screw cap, because even after the victim got up, the wire remains sticking out of the chair, and on the trap itself, it is connected to a small pin that starts the timer in case of disconnection, and it will not be possible to remove it without starting the mechanism. Next, we are offered to use the method of Detective Hoffman. Find 2 pipes, 2 steel rods, or something like that, and insert the products between them. There are a lot of problems in this regard. If after that you do not have any tool at hand to break the lock on the trap, you will not be able to get out of it. The same Hoffman had a different version of the bear trap with smaller claws and very thin rods inserted into them. But even from him, the detective got out only tearing his cheek. The trap in the first Saw is devoid of such grace. The claws are large, and not thin rods are inserted into the mouth, but long, wide bent at the ends of the blades, which will not allow them to be pulled out even when the mouth cavity. In the room where the victim was, there was not a single pipe or surface where a trap could be inserted. I studied everything. What could have been done? Since in front of us is a device with a clockwork, you could try to jam the wires or jam the gears. However, before that, one small trick should be done. On the front of the trap, there are 2 either brackets or fixing clamps. They can be unscrewed if they give way and carefully clamped with pliers. They will fit just perfectly. After that, you can start experimenting with the trap itself. The main problem in all this regard is that when such a product is on your head, you can see little and you will have to act by touch. But it's still better than just waiting. Or you can tickle the belly of a man lying nearby as the last means of salvation. Well, that's all. The author of the video hit start no longer gives any advice on how to win, just retelling the plot of the film. Now the question to you, my dear viewers. What do you think about what you heard? Write your thoughts, advice, and wishes in the comments.
Game over!